Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Write for Your Life. I'm Caleb.
And I'm Timothy.
And I'm Avery.
That's right,
There's a new
everyone.
voice!
We have a guest.
Woo!
Why don't you introduce yourself to the people, Avery?
Hello, my name is Avery Valenciano, and I am a freelance poet. I am currently based in central Indiana. I'm from outside Nashville, Tennessee, and I went to college at Union University, and I got my master's degree at Indiana University. And I write poetry and stories, and I do a lot of random things like that. Calligraphy, collages.
There's so much. She's got an Instagram. We'll talk about that later. It's very exciting.
It absolutely is. And we're excited to have her on and talk about some of her poetry. We usually go over some of the things that I've written, but today is not about me. Today is about what she has brought. There's a couple of pieces that Tim and I have read through and have picked out, and we're excited for y'all to be able to listen to those and also dive in with us.
Yeah. Before we do that, I do have a quick question for Avery, and it may turn into a long question. How did you get into writing?
Well, I have recorded my first poem I wrote when I was 9. Maybe I did some before that, but I have proof of that since I was 9. I wrote one for Christmas once. So, that was quite a while ago. And I was 9. So I've been writing poems since I was 9. But I've always loved stories and books. I had the great fortune of both of my parents reading to me consistently when I was a child. And I was strongly encouraged to read, and I was homeschooled. So I had a lot of time to read, and I did. I liked it. I wanted to be an author probably since I was probably similar between 8 to 10. If people ask me that, I'd be like, oh, I want to be an author when I grow up. So that's been a pretty consistent through line in my life. One of the most, probably top 3 consistent things in my life, actually, is this desire to write and to read and to be a good reader and writer. And so I've been writing for a long time. I got into what I do now. Let's see, when did I start music degree writing? That was January 2022. So that started of my freelance poetry, where I do poetry on demand, and I have my vintage typewriter, and I go to farmers markets or bookstores, or sometimes literally just the street, like a street poet, and I bring my typewriter, and people can come up and talk to me, and I get their story, and then I turn it into a poem for them. And so I've been doing that since 2022.
I didn't realize it had been going on that long. That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah. And then, part of the most recent culmination of all of that, plus a lot of extra work, is my debut original poetry collection, Liturgy for an Ugly Cry, which thank you guys for reading and liking.
Yeah. That's where the readings for today are coming from.
Indeed, yes. And that was published November 2025.
Yeah. And it is available very many places. Again, we'll get into all of this at the end. We'll go over it again. But it's absolutely fantastic. When I bought it, because we were preparing to have you on the podcast, and so I bought it and I read through it one night because it was actually great because I couldn't sleep one night, and I normally when I can't sleep I just sit on the couch and read for a while because it kind of slows the mind down, and then maybe I'll be able to fall asleep. And so I just read through the entire book, every single poem. It was such a cool experience. I've gone back and read specific ones again, and obviously that's this, diving into one specifically is very cool as well, but the way the book is set up, there's different sections, and it has a specific flow, and each section kind of has a theme. And it was beautiful. I cried multiple times. I smiled a lot. There's a lot of cool stuff to unpack in it. I'm really, really excited to get into 2 of them that I was reading through it, and I knew exactly which 2 I wanted to campaign for that we would talk about today. Fortunately, Caleb didn't push back, so I'm getting my wish here.
I was in full agreement with you, man.
You're the first person who's told me you've read it all at once, because most people have told me they have to stop because it's too sad. But I think that tells us everything we need to know about Tim.
Also, to be fair, Tim has to read a lot of the stuff that I write, and I'm not exactly Mr. Sunshine.
That's true.
Today I listened to the part of Once More and then the one about the failure, and I'm like, yeah, this is going to be a string of some sad ones because Tim really chose these sad ones today.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I have had a very similar emotional experience to Tim when reading through the ones that we're going to go over today. It's just strong and evocative, and I very much love that style. So when he recommended those 2, I was like, I agree.
Yep.
Great. Well, happy we're all in accordance. Shall I read one?
Let's do it.
Please.
Okay. This is the eponymous poem in here, actually, and it's called Liturgy for an Ugly Cry, Prayer. Lord Jesus Christ, we both swear and pray on the floor, in a ball, a heap of life-pained hearts. Son of God, I was a child once, and if I wept, someone came to comfort me. Have mercy on us. Please, it hurts, it hurts, it hurts. Please stop. As sinners, crying here with a deformed face, was it my fault? And as ugly criers, eyes red as your blood, thick snotted and puffed up as roadkill corpses, tears and spit and snot, I'll wipe it all on my sleeve and get up off the ground. Amen.
Amazing. It's oh goodness. Oof. I had goosebumps want to break out on my arm there.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's the intent. That's the goal.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't get to ask this question really at all. Caleb, what did you think?
Oh man. I loved it. This just like deep moment of vulnerability, right? Like I feel like it's something that everyone can recognize and sit with. Just the eyes red and puffy and the comparing the snot to the blood about how like thick it is, and it's something that's like not coming out of you by choice but by force. It's just it's just such a strong, again, just a strong feeling that I am like, again, it just resonates with me very deeply. Tim, what did you think?
So I've read through this one probably, I don't know, close to double digits at this point. And I was really excited to hear, Avery, how you read it compared to how I've been reading it in my head. And I think the thing that is the most different is the rhythm that you read it at, especially near the beginning. Because I knew there was supposed to be a rhythm in that first stanza, and I couldn't quite get it. And then you read it, and it almost flowed downwards, if that makes sense. Because you start, we both swear and pray, and then on the floor, and then in a ball, and then a heap of life pained hearts. And the way you read it, it it had kind of a rhythm of, you know, consistency, but the words just keep getting sadder and sadder and going down and down. And I think that's one thing that's really special about hearing poets read their own poems is that you have such a innate understanding of how it's supposed to be read. Anybody can go and read a poem, and if it's in something like iambic pentameter, if it's Shakespeare, whatever, there's definitely a good and bad ways to read it. But when we're reading a poem like this, you can go so many different directions with it, and hearing the author's intention, the author's interpretation of that, I think is really cool.
Yeah, that's certainly one thing about being Americans in the 21st century in as native English speakers. Poetry just, has just gone so far away from
Yeah.
the structure. And in some ways that's very freeing. In some ways I appreciate that a lot because Lord help me, I am not good at pentameter.
Me too.
Wow. The downside is that there is so much room. And in some ways that's exciting because that means that like almost more so than a more classical poem maybe, there's this room for interpretation, which as a poet sometimes I get frustrated by that because I want a certain thing to be conveyed or I wouldn't write it. But then I also am aware in the fickleness of language and communication, and you can put something out there, but it does not mean that the person is going to take what you think it is. And that's true in the more free verse style of poetry, where it is really nice to hear poets read because, like you were just saying, it's what they meant, and it's another window into some of the truth behind the poem.
Yeah, that and the intonation, especially near the end. I like the description of it's a window into the writer's intention because, there's that saying the eyes are the window of the soul. And in something like poetry, you don't have eyes. So it's almost another way to open up the poem even more. And especially Caleb said, this is very open, this is very vulnerable. And hearing you read it, it is even more so because you get emotion, you get intonation, you get all of these things. It adds so much more to the experience. Because I think we've talked about this before. Poetry is not just words, it's a multi-sense medium because you have how the words are organized on the page, you can hear them, you can see them. There's all these different ways of experiencing a poem, and hearing it read is really cool.
Yeah, thank you.
For the liturgy of the ugly cry, how did you settle into the prayer being the form that you wanted this expressed in? Because there's lots of ways that you could have gone for that.
Yeah, so another poem in here, A Candle Lit for Ellen, has part of the prayer. And I've
Hmm.
done that. I've played around with it several times, and I think it works really well, partially because uh, I'm a Presbyterian. And so we certainly believe in liturgy. I believe very much in habit and what you say over and over again and how that shapes you. Look at You Are What You Love by Jamie Smith, for instance, excellent nonfiction example of really elucidating that. And so for Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, like that's actually the Jesus prayer that I had learned about once in college. And what was I? What was I? What? It wasn't necessarily Eastern Orthodox, but I was reading this book about how Christians actually have a lot of different historical ways to pray, and it's not just what
Hmm.
modern evangelicals rattle off, if you will. And I was reading a book about this, and it was talking about also to soothe yourself, you can pray this, and because it places you in the right attitude. So, like, Lord Jesus Christ, you are the Lord, and then as it goes on. And I have repeated that to myself like for years at this point. A little bit less so now because I'm a lot more stable now than when I was working on a lot of these poems, i.e., like grad school and some of college. But like grad school, part of college, you know, I would recite this prayer to myself as part of my own, like calming my anxiety and praying to God. And I also, I had come up with the title for this work before I wrote this poem. And I was kind of like, I kind of need to justify this title because thematically, I knew in my heart that Liturgy for an Ugly Cry is what the overall theme was. But I wanted to have a poem that had the same title that kind of put some of it together. And so having the prayer on one side and then the experience on the other side, and then the tiny little turn at the end of getting up off the ground as a little bit of hope, especially in this last section. I was really trying to tie these things together and to play with another form that had worked well for me in the past, and then also have this coalition of the theme of liturgy of something you repeat over and over and over again, and then ugly cry, which is there's so many times in this collection that's so sad, and that were things that I have literally like I've cried about, and then having the ugly cry be the other description side of it.
It's really beautiful.
It is. I think it comes through very well that this is a well repeated rhythm. I think particularly with the turn at the end of standing back up, it is a to me is an indication of like I have done the thing that I've needed to do, and now I will move on. I like to call it giving just enough hope to keep going because it's just a little uptick.
Yeah, because you have to do the once more.
Once more, baby.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Just listen to that one.
It's starting to become the theme for pretty much the entire podcast is once more. We talk about it almost on a weekly basis, I feel like.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fitting in every circumstance. I mean, it fits great with this one too. I like how the end, it's not I wipe it all on my sleeve. It's I will wipe it all on my sleeve. It's like you were essentially getting up the nerve to get up again, take the action, keep going, and then there's that amen, the last word. it just solidifies it. And it's a really excellent way to create that turn. A question I did have in the middle. I'm curious exactly, like, because there's a couple ways I feel like I could interpret the line. After as sinners, you write, crying here with a deformed face, was it my fault? There's a couple ways I could interpret that question. How did you mean it when you wrote it?
I'd rather hear what your interpretations are first.
I was afraid you were going to say that.
You got an answer, man. Just rip it off.
They're rather nebulous. So when I ask myself that question, there's two ways I ask it. There's the one way where I'm racking my brain for all the choices I made leading up to this moment and which ones led to this outcome and how I could have changed them. And then there's the other way I ask the question that has a little less to do with my actions and more to do with who I am. As in, is this my fault for existing? Do I deserve this? Not because of what I've done, not because of mistakes I've made, but just because of who I am as a person. Is this what I am supposed to have? Those are my two ways of interpreting it.
I think those are great ways of interpreting it. Yeah, because as we were talking about earlier with the potential nebulousness of writing and language, really, at the end of it, it could be interpreted multiple ways. And I think that I was trying to be a little bit more, not necessarily general, but people could read what they wanted, while also expressing something that I had often asked myself.
Yeah.
I feel like that's something that that everyone goes through, and I think leaving it that open makes it easy to connect with, because gosh, the question of just like, is it my fault, is just so it hits me to my core, because I almost assume by default everything's my fault, and so that's like for me it's a scream in anguish almost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you said that this was written specifically because you wanted to have a poem with the same name as the name of the book. And obviously you'd already written A Candle Lit for Ellen, which I wish we could talk about all of these because that one's so good too. I picked this one partially because it is the name of the book and it does do such a good job of tying everything together. A Candle Lit for Ellen is also really good.
It's so sad, though.
It is. It is. Well, I mean, you could say that about almost every single poem in this book.
Unfortunately, that's true. I do have that one section that's good.
That's true. That's true. And this one has that hopeful turn at the end.
Yes.
So with writing this one, you came into it with the title and the idea that you wanted to use the prayer as a framing device.
Mm-hmm.
And if I remember properly, the lines that you have of the prayer, that's not the whole prayer, right? There's more to it.
So I added the and as ugly
Yes.
criers line, but
I thought there was a little more. There might not be.
It looks like Tim was wrong. And
Yeah.
that's all anyone else is ever gonna hear.
Great.
And then I will have egg on my face, as is usual.
It's okay.
But anyway.
You know, the protein's good for your skin. So it's an
I
anti-aging
pictured it
device.
as cooked egg, though. I feel like it doesn't absorb
that
as well
won't
when
help
it's
at all.
cooked egg.
No.
Yeah. It's like that kind of wet scrambled egg where it's like not quite done, you know?
Ooh.
Is that not what you guys
Let's
picture
bring it back.
when
That's
someone
gross.
says egg on
No,
your face?
I don't. Let's bring it back. Caleb, ask a better question.
Oh, goodness me. Gosh, that would be really great if I had a better question prepared. Tim's our resident thinker on the podcast, which is really unfortunate for moments like these. You know, you said you were reading about these different specific prayers for it. Is there a moment or a time that you specifically think about when you're writing this or when you wrote this? Because when I write something that is emotionally that's emotionally very like wrought, I tend to have a specific memory. You kind of made like vague references to, you know, just like times in college. Is it a collection of a bunch of those things, or was there like one specific moment that you sort of like were drawing from the well when you wrote this?
Yeah, I would say more so the part of grad school. So college, I had a great time in college. I cried in college, but not like I cried more in grad school, even though grad school was shorter. And then, as I mentioned in my preface, it's a lot about my early and mid 20s. And
Mhm.
I have cried a lot in my early and mid 20s. And it, how do I put this? So when I was younger, I made it a point of pride to not cry very much. And I would try really not to cry if I could help it. But the older I got, went through a little bit of therapy. They were like, actually, you should maybe cry. And so I think in my head, it is uh, both symptom and growth, and also indicative of like just the ups and downs in my life in this season that most of this talks about. It's because I was crying and I wasn't suppressing as much as I did maybe when I was younger. I mean, I wrote this in 2024. No, honestly, 2024, 2025, who knows? It was one of the more recent ones because, again, I was writing this to tie some of these things together. But it was probably about all sorts of moments that I was literally on the floor sobbing uh, since 2019.
Yeah, a lot of those repeated feelings that you have, it makes it easy to draw upon it because it's so familiar.
Mhm.
As unfortunate as that is when referring to something such as this.
Yeah, but I'm glad and I'm kind of surprised because like I'm obviously a female, and this a lot of this, some of it's very specific to like a late teenage, early, 20 something girl going through life. But I'm glad that you, as men, and I've had people who are much older than me also read it and get a lot of things out of it. And so I'm glad that even in the specificity of my experience as a female 20 something, that's not the only kind of person that can get something out of it. And I'm glad because I see that as a measure of success that I was like, oh, I have written something that is enough true, that speaks enough to the universal experience that way more people than who I was when I wrote this can also enjoy and get something out of it.
Yeah. I think the specificity of it actually helps because we can talk in generalizations about emotions, but that's almost a lecture. You describing a specific experience or a specific set of experiences with this emotional language and poetry, it lets me, at least, experience something I've never experienced before. And I think it allows me to essentially empathize, not in a, pat you on the back, it's okay kind of empathize, but like step into your shoes for a moment and understand, okay, this is how someone else views the world. This is an experience someone else has had, and this is how they felt in that experience. That's not something that is easy to get. We can talk to people and they can tell us how they feel, and we can use our imagination and try and understand maybe this is how this person is reacting to this experience. But especially with poetry and especially with this kind of poetry, there is not really another way to get a glimpse into another person's experience with this much detail, especially emotionally. And I think the specificity of it is what makes that possible. And I think that's why, even though I have not had any of the experiences you have had, and I've had a very different life, it still is impactful to me. I can still relate to it, and it hits me in a very specific way because of that.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear it. It's good. It probably means I'm a good poet.
I would say so.
You're certainly
Thanks.
getting your reps in after
Yeah.
you hearing a little bit about your experience and scrolling through your socials. You're definitely getting a lot of shots up, that's for sure.
Well, speaking of specificity, Tim, I think I'll share this one called A Good Dog, which is about a very specific experience. A Good Dog to Scout, 2002 to 2018. Scout, our good dog, we got you in 2002. 15 years you have been our friend, and this is how we thank you, put in a box to be taken away. Over a decade of barking, playing, hunting, digging, good dog things. Now your swollen, sullen eyes look at us in reproach. We watched you die for a week and didn't have the courage to do anything. shamefully letting you sit there in maggots and your own urine. We should have done better. At last, we scoop you in a blanket, though not one of ours, to take you to the vet, though not for a checkup. You played with us so long in happy fall days of fields and fun. You were a fighter against other dogs, a groundhog. You were hit by a car and watched 2 pups of your own die. Now you fight against the cardboard we trapped you with, making sounds higher than I thought you could. I am sick. But against the vet in a cool, dark room, I'm sure you will fight again, my champion. As the barbiturates creep to your heart, you will bite back. But this is not how a good dog should die. My family does not look at each other. We file silently away. I drop my glasses on the floor and cry for the death of a good dog.
That one's so difficult to read and hear every time. Oh,
Yeah.
goodness.
I only am not crying because I practiced it, but when I read it for the first time after not having read it in a while, I was also crying.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
We need a second.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is the obviously every time reading it is special. But the first time I read it, everything about the way you wrote the end, it I don't even know how to describe it. I don't know what emotions all of those are, but they're so strong and there's so many of them. And I'm gonna be honest, I have never had a pet. I've never had a pet die, any of that stuff. And I probably am not feeling all of the emotions that you felt, but I feel like I'm getting part of it. And you're not even describing how you feel. It's just you saying what happened, and it's all there. And I don't know how you do that, but it's very impressive.
Well, I mean, I'm telling the truth, for one thing. In a lot of poems, it is helpful to tell the truth. And like this is what happened. I literally dropped my glasses on the floor. We got back. Or I don't remember now if Dad, I know well, Dad took him and I think we were here at the house. But after he got back and Scout was dead, we didn't look at each other. We didn't talk. We went to our separate rooms and I went into my room and I dropped my glasses on the floor and I cried.
The truth is often the thing that I think poetry can be the best at revealing because it often will convey the most important things in the way that they should best be told. And I think that this is especially true here because you're hitting all of the highlights is a bad term, lowlights. You're hitting all of the significant events during this period of time. And I think the line that hits for me the hardest is like this is not how a good dog should die. And that is something that to me speaks way beyond just a pet where it is very hard to get a good end. And is there even such a thing as that? Because the final few moments are almost never beautiful, but they're raw and they're honest. And it is it is just end. And it is something that is like very jarring to hear of like what we see some things and you say some things where you're like, well, it definitely shouldn't have happened this way. And it's like, well, is there even such a thing of a good way for life to end? Because we definitely know the bad ones, but
Mm-hmm.
I think we were talking about it in Altar of Self, Caleb, about how you create emotion with description and only describing specific things. And something that I often get lost in with my prose is going overboard and doing too much. And I think that's a common trap in prose, but in poetry, you have to be economical with what you put in there and how you say it. And I think that is one of the biggest reasons why it's so good at, like you said, revealing the truth, because there is not a lot of verbosity here. And because of that, it hits so much harder. Because you could describe this same experience that you had, Avery, you could write a chapter of a book about that experience, and it would be more detailed and it would have a lot more in it, and it would not carry the same weight, I don't think.
No, I don't think so either. And that's one of the great things about poetry is because, like, I wrote this partially as a way to process, but also I knew that it was going to be something worthwhile because most, sorry, Tim, most people have had pets in their life, I thought. Maybe not, but everybody I knew had at least one pet of some kind. And so this is something that's relatable. And Caleb said something earlier that I was going to go back to, but what was it going to be? Oh, the emotional impact versus prose, like, and the economy of language, like well, it's kind of getting into other topics, but
We can go into other topics. We can go all over the place.
I myself sometimes think of poetry as this like flowery language, and I have to describe it like, oh, like in this unique way no one's ever described it. And also when I write prose, I get into that. Like I'll spend 10 minutes thinking about another way to have a simile for this very common thing because I am so afraid of sounding cliche. But then as I'm looking back at this poem myself, actually, there isn't any flowery description, and it is the truth. But I'm looking back at some of my choices of cadence and sound, and a little bit of the indentations, which the podcaster, sorry, you're going to have to buy it because you can't see it through the podcast, of how I was trying to structure this. And that is all part of, like, it's part of the economy of language, and it's also part of building a form that can go along with the content, if that makes sense. So, like, when I drop my glasses on the floor,
Yeah.
that's all separately indented to mimic this downward motion of my glasses. So that was a very intentional choice.
This is something that we talked about in an episode that has yet to air. We talked about it in the last episode that we recorded that has not aired yet. And that is that balance between form and function. And this is something that I will just flatly admit you are much better at than myself. You have a much better grasp of form and you use it to a much more powerful effect in this piece and in other pieces as well. What you mentioned that like the dropping of the glasses and the way that you indent that stanza gives way to that. What are other ways that you use to identify if something should be in a unique form versus a more typical form?
Can you clarify your questions?
So, a different poem in the book, you have all the words arranged in like a teardrop shape. And you could have expressed that in just a typical stanza format, but you decided to write it in teardrop format. And then in this one, there are several specific indentations in there. What what are some of the things that go through your mind when you're thinking about the visual form and the visual structure of your poems?
Yeah, so for this scout one, I think I was indenting to both organize and also shift tone slightly. Because at least when I read things and
Mhm.
something's indented, like, that's a difference. Or something's coming sequentially after the next indentation. So, like, when I have left a line, over a decade of barking, indentation, playing, hunting, digging, indentation, good dog things, that's I mean, frankly, that's a logical sequential explanation of this, of things that he's done over this decade, ending with good dog things furthest to the right side of the page. And then again with the glasses going down. And then with the teardrop one, that is an emblem poem. And I love emblem poems. I'm actually was working on a couple this past week, especially now that I'm better at Canva. Holy cow, I can get so much better at emblem poems. I actually have a poem coming out in a very small journal because it's IU focused. That's a quilt shape, and it's like I looked up. I think it's called the Appalachian Star. So I looked up because this is a very place focused poem, and it was very important that I chose a quilt design that was actually from Tennessee. And so I looked up quilt designs, and then I mapped, well, downloaded the quilt square image, put it in Canva, put the words over it with different sizes and spaces. And then when I took the image away, it looked like the quilt shape. Had so much fun doing that. similar with this one in Liturgy for an Ugly Cry, emblem poem, The Tears, because that was supposed to, again, have this theme of the crying. It looks like tears, and it's right after Liturgy for an Ugly Cry, prayer. And so these are supposed to be opposite from each other. I actually worked with my editor and made sure that they were opposite page from each other so you could see both at the same time, because even though they're two distinct poems, again, with the flow of the whole collection, it was important to me that these were closely next to each other. So those are some things that come to mind. I like emblem poems, but sometimes I also just want to be calmer and just do all left aligned. Or like with the other prayer one we mentioned earlier, A Candle Lit for Ellen, I italicized to show that it's a different, like those aren't my words, like that's the prayer, that's in italics. And then sometimes I do tabs in between words so that it takes more space, but then I don't have to use a punctuation mark for it.
Mm. Mhm.
But yeah, I think
Yeah.
if I had to answer, I would say I indent to like show another category or something flowing from another thing.
A continuation of a thought as opposed to a new line, essentially.
Yeah, but then sometimes it don't fit all on the same line, so then I have to like either shorten it or do something else. So some of it's just technical of I write these in Google Docs in Word, and there's only so much space that those have. But I would like to think it's for this great reason of like, oh yeah, I'm really thinking about the ideas and how they connect to each other and flow from one another in this beautiful way that I absolutely made intentional.
I 100% understand that. There are several times where I'm writing something and I was like, "Oh man, everything else is on one line and this is spilling over into two lines. So let me cut and rearrange and move it around so that way it all looks the way I want it to look." And there are times where I sort of stumble into form. I notice that I will rhyme on certain lines, and so I will, pull up a thesaurus to see what I can get and where I need to be in order to make things flow appropriately. So it is sometimes it's very purposeful and intentional, and then there's other times where it's like I just we're just gonna have to do it this way because if I do it another way, it's just gonna look goofy or sound goofy. So I understand that.
It's a struggle, but it forces you to think. When I'm out doing poetry on demand, I'll tell you a little secret. I do use rhyme zones, so I have to look up things sometimes that rhyme. But it's got to be so careful to not sound silly, but I still want like it to sound like it rhymes. And something I want to develop, I would like to develop this as a skill that I've played with. I need to actually probably force myself to do it. Is slant rhymes ish, but like where it has the same cadence and the same vowel sounds. I use a lot of assonance in my poems. I also use a lot of consonants, but like I do want to develop that as far as like inline rhyming, but like not rhyming. Like what are other words that could sound like it goes with the other word? Honestly, Taylor Swift does this great, and I'm jealous of her for that. But that is something that I want to develop in myself in the future, so I don't have these sometimes kitsch rhymes because I want to get away from that, but I still want it to have some element of structure. But it's tricky. And English, English has so many options. It's great. Don't get me started on
Yeah.
English.
I mean, I'll get started on English all day.
One of the things that inspires me is language. And I do have some French words in here, and I've got this old English, Anglo-Saxon epitaph. And it is from the poem Dior's Lament, which is about a shulp, which is a word for their kind of court poet, who's getting booted out of his job, and he's sad about it, and he's talking about how like he feels betrayed and all these things, but he also says like that passed over, so shall this. But people don't know how to translate it. That's just like one way to put how it translated. And so because I am not a nihilist, and I knew this book was going to be so sad, I knew I had to have like moments. I had something to have hope. And even though it's in a different language, this intro is actually optimistic because it's a little bit of that perseverance. Like, this bad thing happened, but it is also over. And like, that came and went. And this bad thing now will too. And so hopefully the ugly cry has happened, but it will eventually be over, which ties back to that Liturgy for an Ugly Cry prayer poem, because I do get up off the ground, and whatever the experience was that got me to that state, it ended, and I was able to to keep living. And that's why that epitaph is what it is.
We talked about that theme of, like, you're gonna take really hard hits in life, but that doesn't mean that everything is over. We talked about that with Icarus and Sisyphus. Oh goodness, that's an episode that hasn't come out yet either. Um,
Well, but by the time that this is out, that will be out, so it's okay.
but we really talk about that. Really bad things are gonna happen because it's life, and it's messy, and it's ugly, and it's occasionally very, very sad. But, you can swim back to shore, you can get up, you can, wipe the snot on your sleeve, and you wipe the tears from your eyes, and you get to keep going. And that's always sort of the enduring theme that keeps going, is that life continues to move on.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
think it's really neat how a book full of poems that are very sad, and most of them are focusing on sad events, can have such hope at the end just because of that little idea. Just because all of these things happened and now they're done. And we can move forward because of that.
I believe it's the game Undertale that has this moment where the character looks in the mirror and it's like, despite all of this, it's still you. Just like, out of all the things that have been seen and witnessed and have happened, you're still here.
I am really curious about the use of French in the poems because I Googled some of them to try and get Google Translate to tell me what it meant. Other times I didn't. And obviously, you know what all of those words mean. Not all of your readers will. So, how do you use that in a way that makes the poem still be able to be understood, but has the impact you want because of the influence of multiple languages?
That's a great question. Let me look for one that
I should have written
has
one
one.
down.
I think it's Dasein, which is ironically a German word, which I don't speak, but it's a cool idea. Even though I hated the Heidegger class. Oh my gosh. Anyway, excuse me. Un homesick lament has a French word in it. It
Oh,
also
thank
has
you.
Latin. Wow, what am I doing?
Well, this is a great example then because that's two separate languages and they're both fairly important to the sentence structure that they're in. And I could guess maybe? No, I can't guess what ubisoft means. I am
Really?
too rusty with
Okay.
Latin,
Huh.
and I am not even going to try and pronounce the French. But so how does that work?
Yeah, so one, I'm not gonna say I'm stuck up, but I am gonna say that I like fancy things, and I like the fact that I speak French. And again, most of this was written when I was a student and when I was learning French more than I am at this current stage of my life right now, but I was almost bilingual. And so there were French words that were in my inner monologue, and that to the extent that some of it did come out in English, and also because some of them, like de l'ailleurs, which is in Un Homesick Lament, I loved that concept when I learned about it in French class, and I was like, well, we don't have quite the same thing. It's always that struggle of translation. We don't have quite the same thing. And so by keeping it what we don't have, I was trying to like grasp at that meaning outside of English slightly. I'm not going to be able to explain super well right now because l'ailleurs is essentially like the elsewhere. There's something that's not here. It's
Mm.
not really a specific place. I think if I'm remembering correctly, it can be used in kind of like a slang general way. But I love that when I learned this word, and it's also a fun one because got a lot of vowels, classic French, like two L's, you don't say any of them. So I'll just read this stanza. Nostalgia for the future, not here, not there, can't wait, can't stay, always de l'ailleurs. And so I'm I'm saying in some ways in English prior to the French word a little bit of what the French word means. And French speakers are going to pick up on that immediately, but English speakers will have already gotten enough from the English that they can kind of gloss over the French word, but still it's there for ambiance. Jumping down
Mhm.
to ubi sunt. Ubi sunt is actually a name for a form of poetry that is an interrogative form where
Ooh.
there's
Mm.
a lot of questions. So there's some in Latin and there's when in the Lord of the Rings, when Theoden is like, "Where now is the horse and the rider? Where is the horn that was blowing? Where is the helm and the hauberk and the bright corn and the bright hair flowing?" That is technically an Ubi scent. Obviously, Tolkien knew this. He had
Yeah.
read many in the original languages, and so again, I ask, "Where's my own hearth? Where's my welcome mat?" An Ubi scent of all the places in my life I have wanted to love. Like, I'm expecting my reader could Google this and find that is a form of poem that I'm also playing with by asking two of my own "where is X" questions. So in this poem for the French and then the Latin is a phrase that if you're in literary theory, if you read a lot of poetry, no. If you study a lot of classical poetry, you'll come across this definition. But I also try to explain a little bit in English that the meaning of the whole thing is not lost.
That is extremely cool.
Thank you. It's just what was I gonna do with my master's degree? Like, not not gonna be a PhD, that's for sure. I gotta get it out somehow.
You got to put it to good use.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
educational work.
Ugh, don't get me started.
Okay, so because I have you here, I'm going to keep interrogating you because I also love linguistics. I'm a little bit more on the like theoretical side, and I like understanding how languages work because I like creating them. But this is all just incredibly interesting for me. So in All Art is Fiction, I think it's on page 5, you have, I'm not even going to try and pronounce that last line of the first stanza, but you talk about, in a reverie, hands arabesque, over the ivories, Debussy whispered, and then there's a French line. And I get all of it, and I kind of get the feeling, but I don't know what that means. And I could Google it, but I am far more interested to hear what it means from you and how you used it.
Là est le plus beau des mensonges. Well, I can tell you what it means. I can tell you what the translation is, which
Mm,
is art is the most beautiful of lies, which is basically the title that I chose for this and like putting these ideas together. All art is fiction. And I am hinting at a reference to Emily Dickinson because one of her most famous lines is "Tell the truth, but tell it slant." And me ending the second stanza on imitating life, maybe, but only through slant, is
mm.
hinting at her famous quote, which again is mentions truth. And then I have this probably inaccessible to many of my readers line about a lie. So, but then again, like right at the end, I still say it in English. Art is a lie, and mine would be no different. So I'm just, I'm playing around,
Yeah.
trying to construct this.
It's really neat how even though I had no clue what that line meant, I still understood the entire poem. I think that's very cool, but it does add to it because in one way you're pulling from a lot of different influences and it makes it very uniquely you. And then in another way, it is fancy, and that's just neat. And then also, French has a lot of stuff that we don't have. I mean, you could say that about a bunch of languages. English, for all of its words, does not have good concepts for things. I know, you know, I am not a German lover in terms of the language, and I know you have opinions about German. German does have some really useful words, though, and English doesn't. And I think it's really neat that you can pull from multiple languages to even better express the thing you're trying to express. Again, even with the specificity, it's still very accessible. It almost means more because it's not just being handed to me on a platter. I'm having to work for it, and it's coming from a very unique standpoint that I would not get if I didn't read this poem.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I want my prose, I want my nonfiction prose to be kind to the reader. But my poetry, I'm like, nah, you can think about it. You also build the meaning in this, so you have to like think about it.
I think making people making is a strong word. I think that putting things in there to have people work at what the true meaning of a piece is something that's like very important for critical thinking, but also what makes art art. If it were to be said plain, it would. If something were so obvious that it could be said so plain, it probably would not even need to be said.
That's true.
And so being able to like weave these sort of things in together to make the reader curious and dive in more deeply makes people grow more intimate and to know it more. And we've talked about to know something more often means that you're loving something more deeply.
Yeah, and that's that. I mean, I can't think of that without thinking of 1 Corinthians 13.
Mhm.
I was also gonna say, I have to like, I sometimes have to be careful about this with myself as I'm writing, because one of my pet peeves for any kind of writing is when it's not charitable to the reader. And so even though I said what I
Mm.
said, and I agree with what you said, Caleb, about it is not a bad thing to have the reader have to engage with the words more to get something out of it. At the same time, I'm also a believer in Trinitarian writing, which I learned about in college, which, Trinity, three. There's the reader, there's the writer, and there's the subject or the something that the writer is trying to help the reader see also. And I'm part of a writing group actually whose main host has a website called Authors Who Serve. And I found out about this writing group actually via the newspaper of all things. And I thought it was like authors who got together and did community service projects every once in a while. False. It's the idea that the main hostess has about it is kind and charitable of the writer to write in a way that the reader can still have a chance at understanding what's going on. And I love the idea of like coming alongside the reader. And I don't do this all the time in my poetry because it is so much about like me. But I am very glad to hear from both of you that in some of these things where I'm just writing, I'm just expressing, you are having the empathy and you are able to like get the ideas and to grasp like, oh, I've never lost a pet, but dang, it hurt her when Scout died, or these other ways that you've reacted to the poems. I'm like, I'm really glad to have that feedback because I don't feel like I do it perfectly all the time, but it is something that in the back of my mind, it's like, I don't want to be like those other poets who are only expressing self and not trying to have any kind of invitation or engagement. Because I was also thinking about what is poetry. And, it's a lot of things. It's form, content. Again, 21st century America, you're going to see some wild things. I sometimes go and look on online journals to try to submit things. And it's always like, we want like rebellious stuff. And it's like, and I look at it and I'm like, it's kind of dumb. I mean, I'm so sorry to the person who wrote that, but like, why are your words all over the page? Like, I do not feel like that is charitable to me as a reader when it's like too crazy. Like, if when I play around with emblem poems, those are like sprinkled in to a broader collection where most things are left aligned and you can read it. But if I can't read it, I'm like, okay, this is for you. And then at that point, I see that as like egoism and pride rather than the grander goal of writing, communication, the logos, which is ultimately community and communication. If you want me to go even further, Rowan Williams, I know I made a comment about him on your Altar of Self podcast, but he has a whole thing where he talks about suffering and description and why do we still care about literature when so many terrible things have happened in the world. And he says, worth and truth are not fictions so long as something can be said, even if the saying is not more than a description, because description itself changes something and establishes that there remains a world in which speakers can understand one another. If I had to sum up some of my ethos about poetry and writing poetry, it would be that. It would be, may I communicate in a way that the other person can understand and feel something also, or see something in there is like, oh, I know what that is. And it helps me to have it in this way that I didn't write myself, but that I can see.
And that is the entire point of this podcast. It is one of the entire reasons why that we wanted to put this together and have it. Is so that way we can, we can talk about these stories, we can talk about these poems in a way that feels open and accessible. It's why we emphasize so much from the very first episode that we are just two people who like to write and two people who enjoy stories and looking at what they mean and what is being told to us and trying to dig into the things that are being told because the the point of a good story is that you can understand what's being told to you. And if you can't understand what's being told to you, then the entire purpose of the story is then null. And so coming here and being able to dive into stories that I've written and stories that you have written and the things that inspire us every day to write and create and to share is what we're here to do. And so I find it to be very inspiring that, you know, that people that other writers are taking this into consideration. How am I communicating this thing and is it going to get across to my reader and is it accessible to them? Because if things are so dense and inaccessible, that's where you can get the sentiment that like the arts are for those people. And that's not what it should be. And that literature is for those people. It's like, no, art and literature and poetry is for every person. It's for the lay person. It's for me and you and everybody else.
Here, here. Yeah. I was wondering, I'm glad you mentioned that of your goal of this podcast, because based initially just from when I heard about it, Write for Your Life, I kind of was trying to guess at the meaning, and I was gathering a little bit of that through the few episodes I've listened to. But yeah, that's great. That's absolutely such a great mission.
Yeah, we did. I at least I struggled with to come up with a title for the podcast because it's sort of a play on words, right? Right for your life, run for your life. It's to evoke like a sense of urgency about it because part of it is to keep Tim and I accountable as well to keep on writing and to keep on doing just on a regular cadence and basis, and us trying to make writing a more regular part of our lives. Now the title is what the title is. I think knowing what I know now, we would have changed the title to something different. But I'm like, we have the logo, we have the episodes, it's the title of everything else, so it'll circle its way back around, I think.
No, I definitely think you should have a. Well, okay, I'm so sorry. I have not listened to all of them. I probably shouldn't say this, but I was picking up on Run for Your Life. But yeah, you can always bring it back. And also, I think it's great that you guys are doing this now because the one I was listening to right before we started, which I didn't finish, don't remember which one it was, and I'm so sorry.
That's fine. We got plenty of them.
Yeah, I was talking about how creation is something that is unique to humans, and I think that it's great that you guys are starting this podcast now when, the internet is increasingly full of AI generated things, and this is it's such a buzzword and such a question. But the fact that you're encouraging people to do one of the few things that is actually what makes us human in this current season is great. And I commend you guys for that. Certainly need more people reflecting that we don't, AI has its place, right? Like, I do use it sometimes for, I use it for math. Honestly, I'm sorry. I use it for math. I use it for dividing
Oh,
tablespoons of crap.
absolutely.
I do not use it for coming up with ideas.
Yeah.
Yep.
It seems very timely to be encouraging people to. Oh, also, have you guys read Tree and Leaf by Tolkien
I have
Like
not.
Leaf
and
by
or
Niggle?
On Fairy Stories? Well, that's the story of it. The other ones On Fairy Stories, they're like together.
Yes. Oh, it has been so long since
Yeah.
I've read that.
Oh, well, yeah. It was
Yeah.
made me think of subcreation and that whole thing, and like that is one of the very hugely inspiring things to me. And I'm so
Yeah.
glad Tolkien was able to articulate it like that, because then I can just quote him, and then I don't have to actually articulate it myself.
Exactly. You can just
Mhm.
quote the master.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really interesting for me listening to both of you talk about this because in a lot of ways, and especially having having you here as well as having Caleb here, it is very easy for me to feel like an imposter because I have not been writing for that long. I have not thought about writing. I've thought about, poetry and all of that stuff a good bit from a like literary analysis standpoint, but from a author standpoint, I haven't really thought about it at all. And hearing you guys talk, it can make me feel sometimes like, oh, I don't even belong here. But I think that's also part of the point because to create, again, is to be human. And there are different, levels and qualities and all of this stuff. And I barely write poetry. I'm very bad at it, but I won't get good at it unless I try. And something that has been very valuable for me, like doing this podcast with you, Caleb, is that it's forcing me to do these things, even though I feel A, like a failure, B, pretty stupid, and C, like I have no clue what I'm doing. But it's forcing me to do this anyway. And I may not necessarily be happy with all of the results, but I have gotten so much just out of the process of doing it. And then also hearing both of you talk about doing it. It has given me very unique perspectives on things, and it's helped me think about especially art in a way that I never would have thought about before. And so from a little bit more of like an everyman standpoint, it's still really important. And even though I do feel unqualified at some points, I am going to keep doing it because it's really fun and it's important. Even though what I write isn't important, but the fact that I'm writing is the important part,
Yeah, and also, like I think Kayla mentioned earlier, literature is not for those people. Art is not for those people.
Exactly.
I spent enough time in a graduate program where there was like, okay, the individuals were nice, but like the sense of the exclusionariness was high. And I don't want to be like that about anything. And I think, yeah, it's great to have started because, there's all sorts of people that started way later than you would have thought. Like poor Tolkien, it took him so long to write The Lord of the Rings. Like he was what, 40? By the time it was
Something
more
like
than that.
that.
He must have been closer to 50. So yeah, there's no space for imposter syndrome here. Literature is so much more than what you thought you should have done sooner.
Yeah.
It's not about being qualified. I mean, Tim, we've talked about this, but it's definitely different to say, well, yeah, it's not about being qualified to create and to do. It's a lot harder to sit down and do something because I have a sketchbook and it's filled with a bunch of little sketches, and I am not a drawer or a drawing artist by any means, but to create, the prerequisite is not to be good. To create, the prerequisite is to be human. And
Yeah.
everyone that's listening and understanding this is, yes, human. It is part of our being, it is part of our nature, it is part of us. And I've been in a lot of rooms where I have definitely not felt qualified to be there, but we're all in the same space together. And to feel like you're not supposed to be there, I think is a feeling that you have to fight against because it will make you shy away from these things. It is something that has made a lot of people, I think, very, very nervous and anxious and to reject the premises of the arts in general. And
Yeah.
to reject the arts and to only claim the sciences is to be foolish. I think Mike Rowe was on a podcast where he was quoting someone. Yes, that's a lot of they said who they said who they said, but he talked about how somebody misconstrued what he said to saying that there needs to be less philosophers and more plumbers when that's not the point. The point is you need more plumbers who are philosophers and philosophers who are plumbers. It's not necessarily that you have to reject one for the other. It is the combination of these two things where you can be in every person and love and create beautiful pieces of art.
Yeah, you should read Shop Class's Soulcraft if you like that concept or quote about the plumbers and
That's
philosophers.
going in the show
I will
notes for
note
sure.
that down. There's going to be these show notes are going to be
It's going to be
a
a paragraph.
notebook long.
Yeah. I think the final thought I had, and I think this is the most impactful thing for me that has actually come out of this podcast at all so far, is both of you talking about what your goal is with art. Because for me, it's very easy to feel like I'm supposed to make something good and like I need to be proud of it and all of these things. Oh, and it has to be, the form has to be correct and blah, blah, blah. But hearing you talk about what your purpose is and kind of changing the goalposts to this is something to share. This is something that for the reader to understand, for the reader to connect with, that takes away a lot of the pressure of being good, and I can just focus on trying to communicate with somebody else, which is something that, to varying degrees, we can do. And that makes it feel so much more approachable to me, because then I'm not trying to be an excellent writer in terms of, form and blah blah blah. I'm trying to be a good writer in a way to communicate to somebody else the idea that I had in my head. And that takes a lot of pressure off, to be honest. And I think it frees me up to feel more creative and more excited about what I'm doing, because if I can share my little, 10,000 word book with somebody and they chuckle, that would mean the world to me. Like, that's all I want now. And I'm just going to try and do that. And that's very exciting. So thank you both for sharing that. It means a lot.
Absolutely.
Of course.
Good.
Well, is there anything else that we want to discuss before we start to wrap this thing up?
I want to get a potentially brief plug from you, Avery, about just pick one thing that recently has been inspiring you in some way as you write poetry or prose or other things. You can take your time. We can cut it
No,
down.
no, sorry, no. Well, two things come to mind. One, I went to my first rock concert earlier this month, and I want to write a poem about it because it was incredible. It was incredible. It was Muse. It was the Wow Signal tour. It was
You got to see
incredible.
Muse?
Oh my gosh,
That's
I got to see
awesome.
Muse. Ah, yes. And they played all of my husband and I's favorite songs. It was just, it was like they were listening to us, because I was like, oh, they need to play Starlight next. And he played Starlight next. Oh my gosh. Anyway,
That's
so like that
incredible.
was a very, like that comes to mind because I've never go to rock concerts. And I do want to write a poem about it. But the draft I have right now, my husband called it Derivative. And the other thing that comes to mind is I just have been trying to do a lot recently because I have the great fortune of only having to work 2 days a week. And I know that this time in my life is only going to be a short time before something else happens that will take up more of my time. And so right now I'm like, I gotta get this done. I gotta work on this stuff. So like I wrote like 3 short stories in 2 months. I'm working on a longer form short story that is like my bigger project. I'm trying to publish a children's story that's already done. I'm fixing to query it and submit it. So we'll see how that goes. I'm looking for competitions to submit things to. So like I'm trying to like really work on stuff now. So like it's not that I'm inspired by something grand. It's that I feel grateful that I don't have more time constraints right now. And I also feel like there's a deadline of like, this is not going to last forever. And I know that. And I need to make use of it while I have it. But I think I'm doing all right. I have like, I don't know if you guys ever come through Indiana, but I've got a speakeasy that I'm planning coming up. I'm going to have a writing retreat soon. If any of your listeners are in Indiana randomly,
Ooh,
That's
those are
cool.
in-person events that people can come to. I'm doing four. I'm doing 4 Poetry on Demand days between August and October. I'll be busy.
Yeah, that's a lot.
So that's inspiring because I'm like, I have stuff to get done.
how far are you away from Indiana, Tim? I know you're busy between now and, I don't know, October of
Forever.
2037.
Indiana's pretty close. We're actually going to this is going to date this recording of the podcast. We're going to Gen Con this weekend, which is in Indianapolis. So Indianapolis is only 4 hours away. But I know
Too
Indiana's a
bad
big
that the
state.
speakeasy wasn't the night that you guys were coming through.
It doesn't have to be August 1st, does it?
No,
Ah,
no.
shoot. We'll figure it out at some point, because that sounds like a really cool time.
It's going to be a great time.
That leads into plugs really nicely. So,
Yes.
I mean, we're hitting all the segues. We're pushing them over. They can't get back up again. Their batteries are dead. So Avery, where can people find out about all of these cool things that you were doing?
I have Instagram, Facebook, and a website. I prefer Instagram because that's the cooler one. I post more on Instagram than I do Facebook. But yeah, my website's just musedaroo.com. And then my Instagram is musedaroo_writing_. You were mentioning wishing you could kind of change your name. Speaking of French, I just had to choose a French business name that no one can spell. But if you search my name on Insta, Avery Valenciano, you should be able to find it. There's not a lot of Avery Valencianos. There are a couple, but none of them are freelance poets. So you should be able to find me. And my book is linked in my Instagram bio. And I prefer that you buy from the Ars Nova website, which is the direct distributor. And so instead of giving money to Amazon, you could just give money to me and the direct distributor publisher, since he is a local small business. I know him personally. He is my friend's fiance. You can buy it on Amazon if you like have some kind of like deal, but like really just go to the Ars Nova website. And again, that link is in my Instagram bio.
It will also be in the description below. I will make sure to do that for you.
Excellent.
Buy it there. Like, you support multiple local people. That's super cool. And you get to keep money away from they who will not be named, just in case they come after us. We're not talking about anybody in particular, of course.
It's funny, I was
They can
about to
find
name
me.
him.
All right, they can go find you two. I'm gonna stay out of this. I've already sold my soul to a major corporation. I don't need another one.
I ain't got nothing for them to take. They can take everything I got. It ain't nothing. All right. For if you'd like to get in contact with the show, you can email us at ctwriteforyourlife@gmail.com. You can also find our Instagram and TikTok also at Write for Your Life. As always, please leave comments, likes, shares, all of the other things. Any form of engagement goes a really, really long way for us. Please go follow Avery on all of her socials. She has some really amazing
Absolutely.
things that we did not even get into here. Go buy the book. It's amazing. Also filled with a whole bunch of stuff that we did not have time to get into.
Like my art. I do
Yes.
original collages and drawings too that you can't even see on the podcast.
That's true. And the calligraphy is very cool.
Oh, thank you. And some of them in Liturgy for an Ugly Cry are not even online, so the only time to see it is if you buy the book.
And you get to read through the whole thing in one sitting late at night because you can't sleep like I do. And you get to see how all the formers together and the indents and stuff we were talking about. And all of this stuff. And Avery, you do, I think you mentioned it briefly, but you do like stuff at shows. You do essentially in-person commissions, basically, right?
Yes, that's the poetry on demand.
There was one for a carrot, I think, at some point, right? It was about carrots.
There was a lady at the farmer's market wanted one about a carrot, so I wrote one.
I really enjoyed that one. So you guys got to
Thank
go
you.
over to Avery's stuff, and if you do happen to be in Indiana, find out where she's gonna be and go there.
In a very normal way.
Yeah, we're not fixing to get anyone arrested. Me least of all. Well, thank you so much for having me on the show. It was great to chat, and I look forward to hearing more of your literary endeavors.
Thank you so much. This has been really cool. It's been amazing to dive into what you've written, dive into how you think about writing, that especially. Thank you for taking the time, because this has been super cool, and I hope everybody else enjoys it as much as we did.
It has been a blast. And with that, keep creating, keep listening, keep being inspired. The only thing that everyone is going to hear is Tim ask a question, and then I'm going to cut in right about here and go, it looks like Tim was wrong. And that's all anyone else is ever going to hear.